And the neighbors are invited, and some of them are very excited that that I'm putting on a party for the neighborhood. So we'll see what happens.
Hey, Don, maybe you can square something for me. With all this focus on the eclipse, right? And it's mostly positive, like just general curiosity, interest, and it's substantial. Somebody has asked me, and they were writing a blog about this, and I was like, it just seems a little bit strange that we have this much focus about the fact the moon gets in between the earth and the sun in just a way that has a very substantial visual effect, right?
Right.
And the thing that is of most interest, we seem to completely not be able to focus on that's happening in the Earth system, which is climate change. You know what I mean? It's like what would be an equivalent eclipse-like thing? There isn't one, because it's an odorless, tasteless, invisible gas that is polluting us, that is changing the climate that we made happen. And so there's no equivalence.
Right.
And so, I mean, it's just there's an uneasiness to me that when I look at this, and I'm like, come on, you're going to do all this for an eclipse and you can't do much for that? And that's like so much bigger, much more important. And yet we are fully distracted.
Yeah, well, the eclipse, the really interesting part of the eclipse at my house will last 3 minutes and 44 seconds. And the whole event will last, I don't know, something like 4 hours. And that's a very different thing, very different scale of things. And it's fun. Climate change.
Sure. Well, I mean, it depends on how you look at it, right? Because I mean, we're doing some really interesting research on the relationship between action and agency and anxiety, and which part of climate change story you focused on,
right,
as opposed to the responses.
There was a comment on one of the earth science listservs I'm on this morning, saying that this teacher in Oklahoma is seeing more anxiety associated with the eclipse than in 2017 about worrying about kids staring at the sun for 20 minutes and damaging their eyes, which I think it happens, but is exceedingly rare. And I think it feels to me like the world is generally more anxious now than it was in 2017. And that's probably got something to do with why there's more eclipse anxiety, if indeed there is. I don't know if it's more or less than in 2017, but I can believe it's perceived as more.
When did the thing?
I am the facilitator, by the way. I guess maybe we have to do some of that business. And there are a few newer faces in the crowd. And why don't we do introductions first, and then we'll come back to Jim and Ingrid's questions. So I'm Don Haas. I'm the Director of Teacher Programming at the Paleontological Research Institution. We'll just do a very quick round of introductions, and I will pass it off to my PRI colleague, Ingrid Zabel, to go next.
Hi, yeah, so I'm a colleague of Don's. I also work in climate change education at PRI. So that means I work at our Natural History Museum and our Nature Center, as well as developing online content. And I will pass it to Seth.
Hi all, Seth Spencer. I'm the Teach Climate Network Coordinator at Climate Generation. It's been a little while since I've been on these calls, but I recognize many of you. We're the hosts of the Summer Institute for Climate Change Education, and I see some of our partners on that project here, and I'll pass to Gina.
I'm Gina Fiorelli-Duranlo. I'm the CLEAN Program Coordinator, so every week, but thanks all for being here. And I'll pass it to Melissa.
Hi everyone, I'm Melissa Rummel. I work at the UCAR Center for Science Education based out of Boulder, Colorado, and I'm an education designer here. So I make a lot of content, do teacher PD. Yeah, help people learn about atmospheric sciences.
You want to
Oh, I get to pass. How about Scott?
Oh, thank you. Scott Lewis here, Florida Climate Educators Network. I'm calling in from South Florida today. Glad to be here with you, and I'll pass it to Tiffany.
Hi, everybody. Tiffany Boyd, also from Boulder, Colorado. Classrooms for Climate Act.
Oops, you muted yourself.
Oops, sorry. We are in the schools connecting kids to science action, science, climate justice, and civic engagement. So just spent 7 hours at the Colorado State Capitol with a bunch of high schoolers testifying on a climate bill.
Been to Albany last week for a climate bill there. And Tiffany, do you want to pass it to, well, I'll just say Karen. How about Karen?
Hi, I'm also in Boulder, Colorado, and it's sunny and warm and nice here today.
And Frank.
Nice to be with you all. Frank Niepold over at NOAA Climate Program Office and under the U.S. Global Change Research Program, and I have a quick update for you guys. So let's throw it over to you, Pete. You're new to me.
Hi,
Nice to meet you.
Pete Suchman, retired earth science teacher. I taught 25 years at the middle school level, and I moved up to the high school and did science research. I'm working on a book, a field guide to environmental activism for high schools, and I'm working with Transition Town. I'm working with All Our Energy to promote offshore energy on Long Island, and it's a battle. And I'm working with Michael Lynn at ecoactus.org. Trying to figure out how to use social media to network high school kids together to form an army of environmental activists who want to vote in a few years.
Welcome.
Thank you.
And how about to Jim next?
Yes, hi. So Jim, Mobile Climate Science Labs, climatechangeeducation.org. I teach in several of the most developed, most in-depth and most advanced classes in the country at K-12 schools on climate change, Washington, D.C. and California, and also do many community events, which tie into the eclipse quite a bit of how the public loves to have science in which they can be engaged in and get to explore things. It isn't all digital. Wow. Okay. How about we go over to Lynn? How about we
Hi,
go over to Lynn? Here we are.
everybody. I'm here in Baltimore, Maryland. It's actually a rainy, wet day today. And I work with adult educators. I've been researching K through 12 climate change lessons to incorporate in a GED program that I run with my church. But I also work for a new nonprofit startup that is implementing an offshore worker safety training pilot program. And we just started with our first cohort. Today is day 2. So
Great.
And I think that leaves just Rachel. Is that right?
Hello, Rachel here. I'm with Florida Atlantic University Pine Dog Environmental Education Center. My title is a program coordinator of education and training programs. So I help develop programs, write for grants. I work with, really our center works with pre-K to grade in environmental education. And my primary focus has been climate change education lately.
Okay. Nice to have you all here. And I think we got around to everybody. Am I right about that? Okay. So we were talking about the eclipse when I remembered we hadn't done introductions, and we had both Ingrid and Jim with hands up. So I think Ingrid was first of those, if it's still in memory.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. Oh, I think I was thinking that, why Frank's question of why can't we engage people in talking about climate change the way we can with the eclipse or get people excited about it. I guess part of it maybe is the eclipse is just, we're not responsible for it, right? It's this astronomical event, but climate change we're responsible. It's kind of depressing. And, you think about the change needed might mean that some people are going to lose their livelihoods, say if they work in the oil and gas industry, or there's just going to be change, which is disruptive. And so those are things that are unpleasant, difficult to think about and talk about. Whereas the eclipse, it's just exciting and out of our control and not our responsibility.
Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very different thing than climate change.
Yeah.
And before we did the intros, Jim also had a hand up. So go ahead,
Yes,
Jim.
so I mean, interestingly enough, the eclipse and being an educator in climate change actually go together quite a bit. As I was looking for doing different things about volunteering and working with our five different big science museums in the Bay Area, eclipses were coming up, and I had some ways that you can look at the eclipse that big crowd can look at, but but this is not just a little pin box thing. You turn in around binoculars and you can project it. And did this in the big plaza of the Lawrence Hall of Science, right? Finding a way that was just simple and cool and brought a crowd in and very social. And it was on the front page of all the newspapers, what I was doing. There I was with this crowd. And okay, so this thing of how do you turn science into hands-on and fun and exciting about important things? And how do you do that? That was like, okay, this is good. So let's do it on climate change. And that's a lot what we do on climate change. When we do it, we get crowds and people have a fun time. And you do that. It's rarely on the front page of the newspaper, but climate change is another subject. It's different than an eclipse, but you can get into all kinds of subjects. With the eclipse, you can get into things about climate change. Seth, and Pete behind you, 2 questions. Why is the sky blue? That actually relates to global warming. It's a little different. It's the Rayleigh effect, but there's the way in which the atmosphere interacts with different types of light, that it preferentially scatters blue light and violet light. We don't see the violet very much. So you can look at all these things, but how do you make it fun and engaging and cool and then tie it into important things? I'm not saying that's a substitute for all the other ways we teach climate change. We have to do it, but let's not miss the opportunity to make it a big social cool thing. Climate change is a very cool subject. It's very fun, but it's serious. The last thing I would say is, if we really think climate change is important, is it worth the effort to make it into a subject that people love to learn? I think it is.
It's a challenge.
Go ahead, Frank.
Unless anybody has a direct reaction to what Jim just said, and just give you a quick update where we are on climate literacy. Is that cool?
Yep.
Oh boy, this is a hard task. Take a look at the color of my hair. It's going to change by the time this thing is done. We are still stuck in federal agency review. It is to get 15 agencies to agree to the exact same language is on a topic like this. And remember, we went from climate science literacy to climate literacy. So that's really where a lot of the challenge is. We're making progress. It's a whole lot slower than I wanted, but that's just the nature of using it the way going the route we did. So I would expect, and I've been wrong about 8 times now, so take it for what you. It's just like, we're closer than we've ever been, but we're not there yet. I would say probably public release for public comment, which is where I think a lot of you can really check to see how we did. And that would be in the late April, May timeframe. Comments come back in and for 30 days, and then we go out to revise, get reapproved, probably July. Basically just me telling you this, I'm saying July. So it's going to be somewhere in there. It's just a slow, steady, methodical process. And so just to give you an update, it's not like we're just sitting over here doing nothing. It's just steady work. So anyway, just to give you a sense of what's going.
And more agencies, right, than last time?
In one way, yes. In another way, no. Because we actually had, if you remember the 2009 guide, we actually had more agencies listed in the partners, federal science agencies, than the logos. So, you know, we are, another way of looking at in response to your question, Karen, is that I coordinated and established and coordinated something called the Climate Engagement and Capacity Building Interagency Working Group. We now have 32 federal agencies sitting at that. Just to give you, I mean, like agencies you would not expect to see working in this space. HUD is at the table. USAID is at the table in real ways. IMLS, other agencies that you're like, what if this gobbledygook this guy's talking about? But there's just like a lot more people working in climate, because if you don't remember, Executive Order 14008 says it is the policy of the US government, the entire government, to work on climate. That was 7 days into the administration. So, and the response has showed up in a very significant way. So there's a lot more potential diversity of agencies who are really looking at this in a much more get it done mode as opposed to study the problem. So I'll stop.
Any questions for Frank on that before other announcements?
Is that a good thing to have more agencies involved, or is it more bureaucratic nightmares?
It's good that you are looking at the serious implementation of how transportation or the other parts of energy that aren't on the energy research, on the climate research side, but are actually on the deploying renewable energies. You're looking at HUD or Justice or Treasury or SEC or, you know, so it's a coordination challenge. But I mean, I think that's what's going to happen with climate over time. Is it's just going to take more and more parts of our civic process are going to have to wrestle with this. So it's a good challenge. It's the kind of challenge you would expect to have, marshaling the resources to do it. I mean, the one thing that I think you guys care a lot about is, you know, in the spaces, we didn't get a lot of money for climate education like we did in 2010. But what we did get was we got massive amounts of money on climate workforce, which tactically is very important to our young people who want to get into the work of it. Well, now there are programs to get there. 65 federal climate workforce programs exist with Bs associated with their budgets, not Ms. So that's big news. But it's just the constellation of activity is just so sweeping. We're just getting to the work of it now. So, you know, it'll be interesting to see how things happen in 25, because a lot of these things are funded through 26.
Other questions for Frank?
Just a quick one, if I may. The Department of Justice seems to be stonewalling the climate lawsuits from Montana. Why?
That one we haven't brought to the Interagency Working Group because we're about capacity building and engagement.
Right.
But I don't know. I don't know anything about that process. But what I will say is, like at the beginning of the announcements, were two of these groups were talking about lobbying their states for climate education policy.
Right.
That's a different policy part that's going on simultaneously, and that's actually starting to make a lot of headway. Whether New York actually passes that bill and funds it this year, there's just a lot of progress just in that one state alone. Then you go to the wider space. So like that's the space I look at, Pete.
Yeah.
Not those policies ones.
Okay. Other announcements? I have a couple of. I'll start since I have the floor. We will be having a educator workshop August 21, 22, and 23 at the Museum of the Earth, and details I'll have next time I see you, which probably won't be next week, but because I'm off to recover from the eclipse. And I was in Albany last week for my third trip to lobby for the climate change education legislation in New York State, which is generally going well, but my guess is will not pass this year. But one way or another, I think a year from now, we will have progress to report that it's been fascinating that virtually everyone that we've spoken to about the bill for more than a few minutes, legislators, members of the Board of Regents, staff at the New York State Education Department, really truly want to improve climate change education in New York State. And yet it's very, very hard to make change because of the bureaucracy of the system. Some inherent issues about democracy in there. But I guess the gears of government turn slowly. And I do think that because everybody's on board, that next year we'll actually have progress to report. And it still could happen this term. And I will pass it to Tiffany. Take it away, Tiffany.
Oh, you called on me. Great. Sorry. Follow-up question for you, Don. Is the bill currently fully funded? I know that a huge issue is unfunded mandates for educators to carry out new work. So tell me a little bit about the funding and if that's getting in the way of it getting
passed. Has been really interesting and kind of maddening. Our Senator Gennardis from Brooklyn is our lead sponsor, and the Climate and Resilience Education Task Force, which I'll put a link for in the chat, looked at the bills that were out last year, and there were, I believe, 8 climate change education bills in the Assembly or Senate last year, and none of them got out of committee. We took the best one of those, which was Gennardis's, and largely rewrote it. All of the bills shared sort of the general problem of not understanding the relationships amongst the Board of Regents, the State Education Department, and education law in New York State that makes it complicated for legislators to legislate what gets taught in classrooms. And I think we addressed that, though one of the complicating issues is sort of poison words, which includes curriculum. Curriculum is a local matter, not a state matter, and standards are created under the supervision of the State Education Department, and a very, very slow process, a decades-long process to change standards in New York State. So we were not either advocating for changing standards or dictating curriculum. And so we avoided those words, and we used the phrase course of study, which made some legislators think that we were advocating for a class, a course. But that's not what we meant. We were trying to avoid using other poison terms, and we created misconceptions in doing that. So I think some discussions on Wednesday with legislators and legislative staff cleared up some of the misconceptions held by people who should have been our key supporters and weren't signed on. And we're like, why aren't you signed on? And we're like, we're not going to support a new course. Like, neither are we. But you ask about funding, and of course, everything's tied to everything else. So the Gennardis took our edits to our bill, almost all of them, except for our request for $20 million annually. And he just took the budget ask out of the bill and said that if it gets passed, the money will be found. And we were also trying to get a budget ask in since last September, and that didn't happen. And he did not put in a budget request when budgets went in. And we have been told again by other legislators that it can indeed pass without the budget, and then the money will be found. And I think that's possible if it does actually get out to the floor for a vote. I think if it does get to the floor for a vote, it will pass. But it's probably not going to get out to the floor because the chair of the Education Committee in the Senate doesn't see all the dots connected yet. And hopefully we'll get him up to speed before before the end of the term, but my guess is that won't come until next term.
Yeah, thanks for answering those questions. So I'll fill you in a little bit about what's going on with climate literacy in Colorado, and I'm sure Melissa and Karen are following it too. So right now in the state legislature, we have a seal of climate literacy bill that's been proposed. That is, it comes with a 0.2 FTE for the Colorado Department of Education for someone to collect data, and that's it. So what it would be is it would leave it up to the districts how they want to interpret climate literacy, a seal of climate literacy, and it would be, you know, some kind of a capstone project or courses. So it's one of these things where it's just like the bare minimum of what could be offered. And so hoping to go back down to the Capitol on Thursday to advocate for that one. One of the exciting things that we have going on is we're getting more and more involved with teacher education. So we just had an article printed in Science and Children about our work, what I put in the chat. And we have a professor from the University of Colorado that's presenting our work at AERA in Philadelphia this week. Really trying to reach more pre-service teachers, trying to expand the definition of climate education that reaches into the community and calls on community members to come into the schools to do this work with and for teachers. And there's such a need for community-driven work and to help connect teachers and kids to larger climate action work that's going on in their communities. We've also started to work pretty closely with Third Act, with Bill McGibbon's group. The Colorado group is about to launch here. Third Act Colorado, they're calling themselves TACO. And we're also pretty involved with the Third Act Educators Group. So really trying to activate retired educators to get back into the classrooms and support their drowning teacher friends who are in the classroom now who would love to do climate education, but they're struggling with student mental health, they're struggling with testing. So we're really trying to build out the model, the capacity of in-class teachers to be supported by their colleagues who have retired. So yeah, kind of exciting. So give the Science and Children article a read.
And Frank had a hand up.
So Don, I mean, one of the interesting things since maybe it's 6 years where we've had state level climate education bills, you know, with Climb Time in Washington State, the oldest, but focused on professional development, then New Jersey standards and the following funding for that's coming out of there. There's Connecticut, Maine, you know, it's not every state, but there's just like this, and then there's the sub-state work. But what I find interesting, and Tiffany, you got to this about the seal, and we were just in Denver last week, and also the Denver school district is doing some interesting stuff at the school district level.
They're doing great stuff.
But it's all over the place. It's like everybody's doing something a little different once you move to systemic climate education. And what I've not seen is like, well, let's do Climb Time New York, and then we'll do the standards as it makes sense to the New York context. Then we'll do the curriculum work, and then we'll do the community wraparound that you're talking about, Tiffany. We haven't gotten to the next move, which is let's start layering these, because it's going to require a layered approach if you're going to make really significant change. It can't be just Climb Time or just curriculum or just standards or just, you know, community support. It's got to be all of them simultaneously. I'm not seeing anybody starting to move these strategies into concert with each other. Sorry for the dogs. Unless somebody tells me, oh no, that's happened. I'm all.
Yeah, I am reminded that we have a topic to talk about today too of social media. So we should, I think, switch gears from announcements. And if there's other stuff you want to share, you can put that in the chat. But Jim raised the social media topic. So I'm going to ask Jim to say a few words about what he'd like us to talk about.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Don. Let's see. One is I think it's been quite some time since we have checked in about this, but there's also been a lot of changes and things going on in social media, and it's a chance for us to, as a community, share with what we see and what we think. I think the thing that most is, what we choose as our single social media platform or three social media platforms. We want to think about that from a community perspective, because to be successful on most of them, you need to have followers, and you need to have people who amplify and repeat, whatever we call it, retweets, or the various terms that are used. It's a good idea to be operating as a community. So I thought, with that in mind, to see what platforms are doing what and which ones people are on. Lastly, I would say there's clearly one specific development that is at least worth noting, and that is Twitter is now X and is a very different place than it was a few years ago. I think it's a fair thing to say, from the scientific community in climate science, it has been the dominant place, the single place to be. Of course, there's YouTube and stuff, but I mean, in the more traditional social media, and there's kind of how much are people shifting, and if they're shifting, where are they shifting to? What are we all doing? But we all want to be effective and work together on that. So that's at least the questions I would pose. But I really encourage anybody to bring any experience and input, insight they have into things.
Yeah, well, I will say, speaking for myself as an old white guy, I'm mostly on Facebook. I used to be on Twitter a lot. Now I'm on Twitter a little, because it's just become a less effective and more vitriol-filled place than it used to be. I am also on Blue Sky, which is small but maybe rising.
Blue Sky.
Yeah. I'll put a link for that in the chat. Rachel, go ahead.
Thank you. So I know Frank has actually said a bit about LinkedIn, and I'm a big advocate of that. I really enjoy or appreciate the connections that are made with professionals across the field, and a lot can be communicated in LinkedIn. I think that's probably my preferred platform at present. I do use Facebook, but more at a personal level, and with Instagram, which was what the kids were using. I used as a teacher, and Snapchat for a very short time, but I didn't like Snapchat. Twitter for a short time as well. But I think out of all of those, LinkedIn's probably my top, and then maybe Facebook.
So I'll mention, oh, go ahead, Pete.
I've been on Facebook for many years with a Facebook page called Science with Suchman, and I post articles there, and I can cross-post to tens of thousands of teachers and science people and so forth. But working with the high school students here on Long Island, everybody tells me it's got to be Instagram. It's the only way to get kids networked. And that's what we're devoting the next couple of meetings to. I'm working on this book, and I want to promote the book through Instagram and create a network of high school students so they can find each other and talk to each other through Instagram and hashtags. So that's on my front burner right now, to become knowledgeable about how to use this to network kids together.
So I was going to say, for PRI, for Don's and my organization, we use Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And one thing to note for us is that our social media are associated, especially Instagram and Facebook, are associated with our public venues. So for instance, we have an Instagram channel for the Cayuga Nature Center, and then one for the Museum of the Earth. And so a lot of the posts there are about things that a visitor might need to know, like, the museum is closed on a particular holiday, or camp registration is open for the summer, those kinds of things. And then interspersed with that, we can make posts that are climate change education posts. And I have found, maybe it's because the Instagram channels are locally focused for us, that locally focused content seems to do well. And maybe that's just kind of a tenet of climate change education that I know we've talked about, that, talk about place-based, locally focused, but so So for instance, last December, I had a series of Instagram posts about how winter weather has changed in our county, Tompkins County, New York, over the last 50 years. And it got a lot of attention. Their local media picked it up, and we had some radio interviews that came out of it. And I think people really related to it also because of the weather in December, where we didn't get a single day of snow. And that can be hard to predict in advance, though that, of course, the NOAA 3-month outlooks are really useful. So thank you, NOAA, for those. So that helped me kind of think about what those posts should be. But anyway, just to point out that for us, it seemed, and in my experience, a locally focused posts about climate change have been effective.
I was going to add something about locally focused posts as well. So thanks for bringing that up, Ingrid. Not in our case, you know, we're UCAR, but we're the managing arm of the National Center for Atmospheric Research. So we have a national audience, and we engage with our national audiences a lot. But we've found, we just recently did some analysis of our different social media posts and, you know, presences over this last year, and we found that we did definitely get more engagement every time it was a local post. So it was about something in Colorado, or was it about an event that we were having, you know, at the Mesa Lab or something like that. And so that was interesting. We also found that we had less interest when we would post just something about one of our resources. So we were like, maybe social media would be a good way to just share about, you know, classroom activities or curriculum or tools to teach about climate change and stuff like that. And we found that kind of people didn't really engage with those. We didn't get as many likes and comments and things like that. But when you talk about something more local or with a more I guess, obviously more human, you know, element to it, that's how you engage people. So if you're thinking about strategies of what kind of content to put in your different posts and stuff, I would definitely say seize any opportunity to talk about an event or a gathering, or to highlight something, an achievement or a person or a group of students or something like that. That definitely seems what people want from social media more than resources.
I'd be curious to know, we haven't named YouTube. Is that a platform that works for anybody here?
I would say absolutely yes, and I would think YouTube is the dominant place for videos and doing that. So no question, I would recommend everybody keep something on that. Though it doesn't allow that, it doesn't have that quick moving. YouTube isn't a thing. The likes don't show up the same way, and it's not kind of set up that same full social media thing. That said, though, YouTube, I would think, is among the things that are really important and used.
You know, when I think about the youth and when I interact with them, when they're looking at their phones, so often they're looking at YouTube. And it really is an outlet for them to learn about our world, honestly. So I think if we could find a way of using it more often. And I mentioned in the chat under Frank's comment of YouTube that Catherine Hayhoe, is a superstar, I guess, in climate education, and she's amazing. And I've used her, work in my own classes and similar things like that. I think it's very effective.
And Scott's
Yeah, I've got a question. I'm just curious if people are blogs or newsletters as part of any kind of social media at all. And if that's the case, which parts do you are effective for your work?
So yeah, well, do you want to talk about that, Don?
Go ahead.
So on PRI's website, we have a blog, and we post quite frequently about climate change and energy, though also on other topics related to our organization's work. And the results are mixed, but actually our highest viewed blog post is a climate change one. So it's one I wrote 2 years ago. It was called something like 10 Things You Can Do to mitigate climate change. You know, one of those list kind of titles, right? The top 5 or this was like top 10 kind of thing. And it since then it's gotten around, I don't know, 35,000 views per year, which is not big by like sort of YouTube standards or a lot of things, but it's pretty big for us. So I think blogs can take off if someone discovers it and then maybe links to it somewhere else.
I have a question. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't feel like individual action is going to save the planet. We need to get the kids networked to bombard the CEOs of corporations and politicians with emails so that they know that there's a constituency that cares. I don't think my taking short showers is going to help. Um, that is one of the things that I'm looking into. Climate Action Now is a wonderful app. You download it on your phone and it prompts you to do 5 things a day. And it makes it really easy to send letters and surveys and petitions. Are those helpful? It's great. Yeah. Am I wrong? Am I right? Is this what we have to do to get everybody? The kids may drag their parents into it also. It's a great app.
Yeah.
How is this what we should be doing now, is trying to get the kids to get their parents active while the kids are getting active in school? And that's why I'm going after the environmental clubs. Those are kids that volunteer in their busy schedules to do something. They care. So I figured that's a good place to start.
Yeah, and certainly on the list of things we need to do is to get kids active in contacting legislators and businesses
And to write op-eds in newspapers and so forth. And that's all within the bailiwick of a school to do that so easily, but it's also controversial. And do the schools want the kids getting politically active in environmental issues? Because I don't see how you can separate the politics from the science.
Well, we've been successful from a local level. So we interact with our city and county governments. And we have a strong Office of Sustainability and Office of Resiliency within our counties and cities. And we have a strong relationship with them. And they contact us for, our use to come and work with them. We've had folks that have interned, folks that have participated in climate summits. You hear a lot of negative about Florida, but actually the South Florida Climate Change Compact is amazing, involving 4 very active counties of Miami-Dade, Monroe, Broward, and where I am in Palm Beach. And basically everything below Lake Okeechobee for the most part. We're very active in climate education and very active within our local governments. Our state government, that's another story.
Yeah.
I would say that one is to, I think it was Karen's comment or question about videos being long and short and so on. That it's a challenge because things are always changing. YouTube had an algorithm that was more pushing. If you get a long video, you're going to get credit. It needs to be 15-minute videos, right? And so a lot of YouTubers were going to the 15-minute videos, even when they just needed a 3-minute video. Well, TikTok kind of knocked that out of being the only way to go. There's 15-second videos, and YouTube is picking up on those too, shorts. So there's a lot of like doing the thing. And so, I mean, I'm not trying to take it away from what you're saying, Pete, is however we are working for climate action and climate education and climate literacy, which I'm kind of a go for. You got to have at the local level, the community level, the school level, all above. Everybody's welcome, and let's do that. The 100,000 level, all those things I think are important.
Yeah.
Undoubtedly, online communication is, an incredibly powerful way in which people communicate, and we as a community to kind of work together. But it's a thing of if you think you can pick one thing and stick with it for 5 years, that's not the way it works. You have to always be shifting around.
Yeah.
Pete, there's another piece of the work that what I'm seeing that's relatively new is, so like, for example, how many of the people in this call knew that Montgomery County, Maryland has the most ambitious climate action plan of the United States?
Nope.
Oh, you did? What? That's cool. I didn't. I live here, which is kind of the point. But the when you look at that plan, we're meeting with the head of climate change Thursday for the county, trying to figure out ways to support it. But if you look inside that plan that I posted there, the heat pump plan to have the amount of heat pumps installed in this county by the dates that are in there are incredibly aggressive. And one of the realities is we don't have enough HVAC technicians to do that work. We don't have enough welders. We don't have electricians. We don't have, I mean, just keep on going down the list. And so one of the moves for our young people is actually to start getting ready to have the skills to actually do what they want these policymakers to tell us to do. Well, we've in some places we've moved beyond that, where we have these plans, and now we got to get ready to actually do the plan. And the majority of those degrees are high school graduate, 1-year technical certification, or a 2-year associate's degree, and nothing more. Vast majority of that work. We are not signaling to our young people this reality at all. And so there's a I get the legislator move, right? And I get it. But there's this other move, which is actually take some time to actually implement, because to become an electrician does not happen overnight. It's a process. It's a multi-year process. Same thing with all these technical certifications. So I just want to make sure that as we're making these moves, we don't forget about this one, because this is actually where we're going to run into the big buzzsaw of delay, is you can't hire enough people to do the work that actually can do the work skillfully. You don't want me installing your heat pump. It's not going to go well.
Yeah.
So just another point to consider. I'm not saying not that, I'm just saying not only that.
Man, Frank, I feel like I've been saying that for a long time because, working in the high schools, there's way too much pressure on college readiness and taking AP and AIF and IB courses. There's just not enough implementation on, not everybody needs to go to college or wants to go to college. We need more electricians and plumbers, and especially in how much we have to change our infrastructure, like down here in Florida, for example. So 100% what you're saying, right?
I'll just add one other point. Sorry, just one quick point to Rachel. Just one quick point. You don't have to, sorry, you're for me, you're there. You don't have to not go to college. You just don't have to go there directly. You can go there later. You could do an electrician for 10 years and then go to college and get something else. So it's not you're not stuck in that path. It's an option for a period of time, and then you could do something else. There's more flexibility in our system.
Yeah, I was just going to say New York City is piloting a green CTE program. It's starting. They are and growing. They're trying to get more teachers for the program right now, but it's underway, and that's an issue of equity within the state. It's the largest school district with about 1/3 of the public school students, and they're doing some pretty good climate stuff in the city, and the other 2/3 of the students in the state mostly aren't getting that.
One thing I think that the CLEAN network, the bunch that's here, get right, and maybe people can say about this, is there's a balance of working to get the policies and the big question, right? But there's the thing of who's actually doing this. Who are the teachers? What are the apprenticeship programs? What are doing things? Do we highlight that? Do we bring that forward? Because we want all these other things to happen, but who's actually doing it? Are they being recognized? Are we connecting with it? Because if we just do one, I think we have here people who both work on policy, and Don, you're passing things in New York, and Frank, you're working on what the federal government is saying about climate literacy and so on. But we also have people, retired and current teachers, working in the Tiffany and things. People recognizing what people actually are working on things. That would also go for the workforce development. There are existing programs for teaching the most, or having people into the building trades, for instance, that are shifting, like with wind, but they're generally working with existing ones. And I would tie in the question that when I move in both the schools that I teach in Washington, D.C., one is a middle school, private school in the northwest part of D.C., and the other is a public school in southeast Congress Heights. So you're dealing with one that is essentially 199% African American and Latina, right? And the other is mixed and things, but there's basically that if you're going to go in, if you're a person of color, you don't go into those fields. Especially if you're Black, you don't go into those fields. So on so many levels, that's an impediment to what we're doing. It's wrong. It's unjust. It's losing out on people, and it's just not true. But that's something that really has to be tackled at the ground level. I think if the students don't get it, that that we don't find a way to encourage and support them to do this, it doesn't happen, and then it doesn't get the snowball rolling. When students see that others have successfully gone into these fields and done that, those are the role models that a person who's a governor or someone who does policy will not communicate effectively with the students. Oh, you need, you want to see it happen from things. So I just to bring up, but again, I think we should applaud also just the CLEAN network, is that we are bringing together people who are working at the top level and top down, and we're bringing with people who are in the field doing this. That I think that's the right mix.
Those are closing words. It is 1:58 Eastern time. So
Can I say one thing, Don?
absolutely.
Because, and I've been seeing this, and I know that we've been talking about we're way past, shorter showers and turning off lights. At the same time, I think it still needs to be integrated into what we're talking about, because a kid particularly can get incredibly overwhelmed. But like, whoa, wait a minute, getting in front of all these people and talking to them about what I really want for my world, I think it's important to maybe have a balance and to still keep those types of things in the conversation so that the kids can feel like they have some control in some sense. If I do this, then this can work towards a better future.
Yeah, I see those personal actions as a first step to understanding what can be done and learning about how the whole system works.
I think the problem is that a lot of environmental education stops at the individual level.
Yeah.
And if it stops there, we've lost this huge opportunity to get kids civically engaged around something that is the most paramount thing about their future.
Yeah, and as I've said before, James D'Amico's book on teaching climate change in the social studies classroom changed my vocabulary, and so I try and say industry-led climate change rather than anthropogenic or human-led or whatever.
Yeah, good point.
Very useful label.
Whose book is that, Don?
James D'Amico.
You mentioned
James
Can
D'Amico.
you put the link to that?
Sure. Yep.
James D'Amico. Huh? I haven't seen that yet.
Oh, no, we did. We've done stuff on it.
You mean like one of the weekly webinars that CLEAN has done since 2008?
Yeah.
That was a joke. That was a joke. I was just trying to be cheeky.
Yeah, no, but I believe we've had James speak, and I know we did a teacher workshop session with him, and I'll find the link to that recording too. And I put in his university webpage, which you can find the book there. I will find the recording of.
Is that the How to Confront Climate Denial? Is that?
I think so. It's got social studies in the title. How to Confront Climate Denial, Literacy, Social Studies, Climate Change. Yep.
Cool.
Yeah, and I think it's a solid book, and it actually is unsurprisingly broader than just social studies.
Good.
You can read it kind of across the disciplines. Just a moment, I will find the link to his talk for us.
Yeah, I put the link to the CLEAN call with him.
April
about a year
4th,
ago.
last
Yep.
a year and a day ago.
Here we go. Teacher program, Paleontological Research Institution.
Thanks, Don.
Unknown caller.
See you guys.
Here's the link. Here's the link. Thanks all. We'll see you next time. Happy eclipse. Happy eclipse. And the host for tonight's program, our special guest tonight is James D'Amico, who is the author of How to Confront